Hey, what's up guys? Today we're talking portrait photography and how to edit portraits in Lightroom. Cue intro. Alright, what's up guys? Welcome to this tutorial on how to edit portraits in Lightroom. Let me just pause for a quick second to say thank you for joining on this and the subscribers who subscribe to this channel. It's awesome to have a community of photographers here that want to learn how to take better photographs and then edit those photographs a little bit better in post-processing. It's so great to have a positive community of photographers that want to learn how to take better photos, like these portrait photos. Now, I live in Haiti, so my portrait photos are going to be a little bit different than yours since I'm living in a third world country, but these tips are the same throughout. You can use these on any portrait photos that you're going out to shoot. I can't wait for you to use them on your own photos, so let's get to the computer screen right now. Alright guys, now that we're on the computer screen in Lightroom, we can look at exactly how to edit portrait photos in a software like Lightroom. And since I live in a third world country in Haiti, I have a lot of experiences to photograph especially kids and very candid emotions that turn into great portraits like this one here. So I've gone through and selected this image right here that I want to go through and edit so we can look at exactly how to edit these portrait photographs in Lightroom. The first thing you want to do is just find the one you want to edit, and you can do that through a variety of different ways. I like to use numbers on my keypad, so if I hit the number 1, it will rate that photograph as 1 star, and that way I can select it out. And then I go over here to the develop module. I can either click this or hit the D key on my keypad and it will open the develop module for me. And once I'm in the develop module, I have a bunch of different options that I can go through. And first things first, I always go through basic edits that you can make originally. And it starts out with the coloring and the temperature of the actual photograph. Since this was shot at golden hour, we have a lot of yellow light going on and maybe slightly too much yellow light. So I can dial this temperature back within the photograph and take out a lot of that yellowness that's in the photograph. Not the entirety of the yellowness that's in the photograph or the golden light, but I want to remove just a little bit to dial that effect back. Since we also have like oranges and reds in here, I want to take some of that out. And then we can play with things like exposure and contrast. Exposure looks really good right here. I have no problem with it, but I am going to increase some of the contrast in this photograph and kind of separate some of these shadows and highlights out. Highlights are good. I like the rim lighting that I have going around this little girl. Shadows are okay. I may increase those just a little bit, but it's just based on your personal preference of what you like within your photograph. I'm going to bring down my whites a little bit to try to get rid of some of these blown out areas. See a little area right here on the shoulder that I want to take out some. Not all of it to add that little burst of white right there, but I want to take out just a little bit. And then blacks are good too. If you look at the histogram while you edit, you can see that we really don't have any blacks in the photograph at all. We do have some of that, some whites in here like I showed you on this highlighted section. To find those, if you can't see them, you can hit the J key on your keypad and those will highlight in red for you. So next up we have clarity, and clarity is something, especially in portraits, that you can go big on or you can go less on. Now clarity, if you want a little bit more detail in your photographs, like I like in my portraits, I increase the clarity. If you want to have that like soft effect on the photograph, you can decrease your clarity. I just kind of look at what the mood of the photograph is, and usually I like to increase my clarity just a little bit. I always, especially in portraits, keep it below 15. So I have this one at like +10 right now. Looks pretty good. Then with vibrance and saturation, I always increase my vibrance more than my saturation, just because saturation tends to do a little bit more than vibrance, but I will increase it just a little bit, maybe like a +2 or a +3 to give those colors in the photograph a little bit extra boost. I like the sliders over the tone curve, so I stick with those. If you do want to increase or decrease some of the things in your photographs, you can use the tone curve instead of the sliders, but it's the exact same things that you're altering based on the histogram. Next, we come down here to the hue, saturation, and luminance sliders. Now, these are pretty important, especially in photographs and portraits like this, where you have some pretty significant color going on. As you can see, we have blues and reds and oranges and yellows all mixed in the photograph. We can use the hue, saturation, and luminance sliders a lot with these, especially like oranges and reds. Say we want to change up what these look like, maybe make them a little bit more red. We can adjust those however we want. I'm going to keep the orange pretty much where it is, and then play around with the reds, see where we have those and where we like those. Maybe increase those a little bit more to like an orangey yellow. Not that much, but just very subtle changes here. And then yellows, we can change and play around with those some too. Whatever makes the person stand out more is what I like to go with. So if I decrease the yellows all the way down here to like an orangey tone, well, then she kind of gets lost within the background some. So maybe I want to increase this just slightly to like a +6 to make her stand out a little bit more from the background that we have. Greens, I can adjust those as well. Maybe like a more yellow to help it fit in with the rest of the colors going on in this image. And that's pretty good. Blues, we can adjust here just depending on how we want her clothes to look. We can adjust those up or down. I may increase those just a little bit. And I think that looks pretty good for the hues that we have going on in this photograph. And then saturations. These separate out the saturations of specific colors. So if I wanted the reds to be really saturated, like I probably do in this, especially the bow seems like it gets lost some in the photograph, I'm going to increase those pretty significantly. And how I do those while keeping them natural is increasing them all the way to 100, and then I'll dial it back until it looks realistic. So I'll just watch that red bow and stop when it looks realistic to me. So I'll leave it right there at +20. Oranges, we can play around with those. Maybe decrease those some because a lot of her skin tone is orange in this photograph as well, and I don't want her really shining orange in this photograph. Yellows, we can increase those some, and definitely blues to really increase the color in her shirt as well. Looks pretty good there with saturations. And I'm going to increase blue luminance as well to kind of make her clothes glow just a little bit, see what it does with the reds. I just play around with these, whatever colors are represented in the photograph. I'll play around with the luminance, see which one really makes the photograph pop a little bit more. As you can see, increasing these yellows makes it pretty interesting the way it separates the person from the background. So I'm going to increase the luminance on the yellows pretty significantly. The orange messes too much with the skin tone, so I'm not gonna do that, and that looks pretty good for the luminance. I'm gonna work with that. Next, I come down to any post-crop vignetting that I want to do. Post-crop vignetting, I always decrease that, maybe bring a little bit more attention to the center of the frame. However much you bring in is going to show on the edges. So I like to go very, very subtly on this, maybe like a -3, where you can barely see the darkening of these edges, but it does bring more attention to the center of the frame where the person usually is. And then I'm going to come down here to the blue primary saturation slider and just increase that a little bit, see what it does to my photograph, and then dial that back down to where it looks realistic again. It's going to be a very subtle change, like a +5. So I've done all of my color corrections, and just to see beginning and after, I can click down on here, this before and after view that we have. So this is before. You can see not as much detail and not as much separation from the background. The clothes are a little dull. This is after the changes that we've made and the increases of detail that we've made in the photograph as well. Let's go back to the original view now and work on some very subtle changes that we can do within this photograph. And I'm going to focus in here on the face. Like when you take portraits, the face and specifically the eyes are going to have the most detail and the most interest level within the photograph. And especially this one is going to add a lot of detail and interest. So either come in here and select like a 1:1 or a 3:1 ratio even to work on these little minute details that we have, and that will automatically pull up your hand tool right here that we have and dragging around in the photograph that we can use. So I'm going to work on, let's see, just a couple spots on the lower face that we can work on, and I'm going to use the spot removal tool to do this. So I just click on the spot removal tool and dial that down using my left bracket key, or you also have a size slider over here that you can use, and you can just slide that up or down based on how large you want that tool to be. And I usually just have this just larger than the spot that I want to remove. And I just want to remove this little spot on the face. Boom, Lightroom will automatically choose the skin tones that are equal, and I'll just go around and select some of these spots that we have on the face and just take those out really quick. Really easy changes to make, but they make huge differences in the overall photograph. And then I'll come up here to the eyes and we'll work on those next. And the eyes are what connects you with the person. Even though we have one eye showing and it's really not that big in the overall photograph, it's going to add a lot of detail to the photograph. Now, you can use red eye correction or you can use the adjustment brush. I always go with the adjustment brush because I have more control over what it does. Red eye really just like is one click and Lightroom does everything for you. Adjustment brush, I like to have control over everything. Now, you have a couple options here in the adjustment brush. I keep it on exposure just because that allows me to see initially where I'm painting in. And I will always have auto mask selected so that it finds hard edges for me with the brush and eliminates those from what I'm painting in. And I can increase or decrease that size again with the left or right bracket keys or the size slider that's down here at the bottom. But I have this at a good size, and I'll just paint the white part of the eye just one slide over, and it looks really bad. Like, I just like to have it decreased so I know exactly where I'm painting and exactly where the changes are going to be made. Now, since the eye was a little bit yellow instead of white, I'm just going to increase that exposure until I still have detail, but it turns the yellowness a little bit more white. And then I will add some contrast, and then I will select a new brush and I'll come in and paint the iris of the eye and increase the clarity of that just to add a little bit more detail to that as well. I'll hit done and zoom out just to see what that looks like. And it made a very subtle change, but it really helps you connect with the eye a lot more. So now I'm going to work on the teeth. You know, sometimes, especially in golden light, even if you have the widest of teeth, sometimes it has some yellow light reflected on it. So I'm going to decrease my adjustment brush and create a new brush here, and I'm just going to paint in the teeth some. Now, the teeth are really interesting because you want to make like really subtle changes just because you don't want it to look super fake. So I'm just going to paint those in with the exposure decrease a lot to see where I'm painting, and bring that up to normal, and then I'm going to increase to where that just whitens them up just a little bit,
add a little bit more contrast and maybe add a little bit more clarity to that as well. Makes them look naturally white instead of adjusting something just beyond control. Now, there is a teeth whitening adjustment brush you can select, and that will increase the exposure and decrease the saturation. I like to use a custom exposure adjustment brush instead, just to have more control over what I'm selecting. So let's zoom back out and see what that looks like, and then select the before and after again, so you can see, like, dial in on the face here of what we have before and after. So we've just whitened that a little bit and whitened up the teeth a little bit to have more detail on the face and bring that connection of the face out a little bit more. We remove these spots, and looks like we have one more spot, this tiny little spot on the tooth down here, to adjust as well. And even though these were shot in a third world country, like, these are the exact same effects you can use on any portrait anywhere in the world. So these are awesome tips for you to use next time you're editing a portrait photo in Lightroom that has all the tools that you want it to have. So if you like this video and you found it helpful, go ahead and hit the thumbs up like button below, or subscribe to this channel for more videos in Lightroom or photography that might help you improve your own photographs as well, and help you take leaps and bounds over everybody else also taking photos.